All right, be careful what you wish for, Republicans, but you get that repeal on Obamacare, it's on you, and leaving 32 million uninsured is on you as well. Ed Henry with the CBO report that has both parties doing a little bit of arguing. Ed.
That's right, Neil. Good to see you. This is a case where you have a Democratic leader in the Senate, Chuck Schumer, who wants to protect Obamacare. So he ordered up this report on the impact of Republican repeal. And surprise, surprise, the Congressional Budget Office comes back and says the sky would be falling. Republicans, as you note, are pushing back hard by saying the sky is already falling under the weight of the current law, and that the CBO only looked at the impact of repeal but did not look at what a Republican replacement would do to repair some of these problems. Specifically, the CBO, as you noted, telling Senator Schumer the repeal of the law would mean about 32 million people who have health insurance now would lose it, 18 million of those losing it in the first year alone, and that the price of insurance premiums will double within a decade. House Democratic leader Nancy Pelosi declaring, quote, Republicans need to wake up to the brutal impact that repealing the Affordable Care Act will have on the lives of their constituents. Behind each of these stats are stories of millions of Americans whose lives hang in the balance. Now, what she is doing there, of course, is foreshadowing the political attacks that are coming from Democrats, but Republicans note some people who had insurance when Obamacare took effect, of course, lost their health care despite President Obama's promises, and that premiums already are skyrocketing, as Republican Donald Trump made clear and used during the campaign. So Speaker Paul Ryan pushed back, saying, quote, this projection is meaningless as it takes into account no measures to replace the law nor actions that the incoming administration will take to revitalize the individual market that has been decimated by Obamacare. So you hear both sides there. The very bottom line is the actual repeal is not necessarily what's important about the future. What is important is what do you actually do after you repeal the law. Republicans insist that they'll have a plan that repairs this and make sure that millions are insured. But we haven't fully seen that plan yet, Neil.
But the 36 million they're talking about, even though it's 20 million who have it now, that if they had left this alone, then that's what we'd be up to by that time, in 2026 or whatever.
Yeah, specifically the breakdown, in my understanding, is almost nearly 20 million who would lose Medicaid coverage. Remember, that was one of the most important parts of this expansion, if it's repealed. And then also, if you take out the individual mandate and the fines, the penalties for not having insurance, millions more would lose their insurance. We should point out, some of those millions would be offset by the fact that their employers then would step in and give them insurance. So that's why, millions would lose it, but millions others would pick up insurance as well, Neil.
All right. Thank you very much, Ed Henry in Washington. Now, again, as Ed pointed out, these are projections, and Republicans were immediately pouncing on it and saying, well, projections are one thing, actual history is another, and the history of the CBO making projections under either party's leadership has been at least scant. For example, the 2010 original CBO estimate for Obamacare subsidies versus the actual, as you can see, significantly more at $4,240 per taxpayer, significantly larger. There are other examples. I'm going to bring them up with Beating Obamacare author Betsy McCoy. Betsy, what do you make of this? Because obviously, one of the risks of Republicans repealing Obamacare is just that sort of stuff and that kind of press that it generates.
I think most Americans know that this report, which I have right here, is just fake news, Neil. It's fake news because it's based on the laughable premise that Congress will...
Was that the actual report that you ripped up?
It's only 4 pages, and it's not worth reading twice.
All right.
It's based on the laughable premise that Congress will repeal the Obamacare law without replacing it. It's kind of like asking a doctor to predict how long will your patient live after you remove his heart and you don't give him a transplant, another organ. So obviously, it's not the kind of projection that is reasonable to ask for.
Well, Chuck Schumer, I think the incentive for doing this was the Republicans haven't come up with a plan. They're so hot to trot to repeal it that they don't have a backup. What is the plan if they don't have a replacement right away to protect the ones, let's say, who already have the coverage now?
That's right. Donald Trump, President-elect, and members of Congress have reached an agreement that the repeal and replacement will coincide. In other words, there will not be a period of time when Americans don't have a new law with new health insurance coverage protections. People with pre-existing conditions will be covered. The low-income families who depend on Medicaid will be covered. And the large number of newly uninsured, Neil, people who lost their plans or who are now paying hardship exemptions, 12 million of them, penalties, 6.2 million families, that's about 10 million people, they can't afford these new Obamacare plans. And then there's another 5 million people who are technically covered, but Neil, they can't actually go to the doctor because they can't cobble together enough cash to get over that $6,000 deductible. So the other thing that the Republicans are going to do in their replacement is make sure there's a wide variety of more affordable plans, fewer mandates, another method of funding those with pre-existing conditions rather than on the backs of the healthy. They'll be taxpayer funded instead, and that will really control premium growth. Premiums have doubled since Obamacare went into effect, doubled since the end of 2013.
So play this out then. Republicans do have to be aware of having a fairly close replacement after they repeal, right? Maybe not immediate as Rand Paul wanted, but it can't be years, can it?
No, of course not. And the real key is that the date of the effectiveness of the repeal will coincide with the date when the new law goes into effect. They don't have to be legislated the same day. They just have to have the same effective date.
All right. Betsy, thank you very, very much.
You.
All right, in the meantime,